It was Robert Frost who said that two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. A poem called The Road Not Taken. I think in life we often try and take the easy road, the wide path. You could probably call that comfort today. You could probably call that pleasure, ease. But life is not that easy on us. It comes with suffering, it comes with growth, it demands of growth, it demands contribution. Everyone will contribute to this life in the end, whether your body is contributing to the ground or you make great gains in saving the world from plastic pollution. It matters not. You will contribute. And I think one of the big ideas of reality, whatever that might be, is that we all work in a circle. Some people would call that the circle dance of life. So being lost, and I use that word quite carefully, being lost in an addiction, in a depression, many people say it's like being stuck underwater, not being able to rise just to the surface. And other people describe it as a way that they lost themselves, and their desire, they constantly hope, pray, and wish for a way back to a place that they used to be. And that's never going to happen. You know, life goes one way around, and we often describe the recovery clock, where life is ticking in one direction. It is maturing you through love and through suffering, through problems like addiction, depression, anxiety, where you get to come out the other side more than you were in the first place. So that doesn't make sense to many people. And, you know, we've got today the millennials who are distracting themselves from life with gaming, spending money, comfort, and of course we know that it is not working. We know today that our mental health situation is worse than it's ever been, despite us being the most technologically advanced, the most comfortable. I mean, we live like sheiks. We've got water on tap. It wasn't so long ago that we didn't even have electricity in the home. Toilets were outside, and everything has changed in the last 50 to 100 years, but has not worked for us emotionally. So an intellectual problem solver would use his sharp intellect to make himself more comfortable and experience more pleasure. But that clearly is not working for us. So it has to be about something else. And the something else I think it is about is exactly what step 12 is. Waking up spiritually, internally, and knowing that you are part of, you are connected to something much, much bigger, which is other people, the world. You know, it is the universe, which, as we know now, is expanding. It might even be infinite. So don't get lost in the idea that you have life all figured out, that you are now stuck with addictions or depressions and that's it. I often hear people saying, you know, I suffer my bipolar. You can treat yourself, and whatever word you're going to choose, nothing, not even you are permanent. Why on earth would your bipolar or your addiction be? And we need to re-question these things, because there's always two roads to take in our thinking, and they take us to very, very different places in the beginning. And I think we still get to take a long or a short road, a long road of avoidance or a short road of walking through what we view as problems, walking through tough feelings. In social work, they say lean into the discomfort and look at yourself. So looking at yourself, living this life, really is what people have referred to as enlightenment by gunpoint. An addiction, a depression, a problem, mental health problem, can be enlightenment at gunpoint. The cure for all of these things, the treatment, is often revolves around letting go of the need to control, letting go of expectations, resentments, letting go of old ideas that don't work for us, delving into false associations we might have made as an abused child, and reworking these to move from viewing the world and other people as a malevolent and violent place to a more loving and kind one, where people are as ill as they are uninformed. It was M. Scott Peck who wrote one of my favorite books called The Road Less Traveled. And in The Road Less Traveled, he opened the book with a line that I could never forget, which was, "Life is difficult." I think it takes a lot of understanding, a lot of life experience to not only become aware of the fact that life is difficult, but also to accept it. It's never going to be easy. It's never going to be pure comfort, pure pleasure. It is always going to be moving from suffering to love, moving from fear to love, spiraling in terms of spiral dynamics, up and down, moving us always forward, which I imagine the universe itself is doing, moving forward, grinding and turning everything into a one contributional state. M. Scott Peck wrote Life is Difficult, and it took me about 10 years more to go back and actually look at the next line of the book, which together with the first makes sense between suffering and love. And he says this. The chapter is called Problems and Pain. Life is difficult. This is a great truth, one of the great truths. Here's the second part. It is a great truth because once we truly see this truth, we transcend it. Once we truly see this truth, we transcend it. That is recovery. That is recovery from self. In the first half of life, if there is such a thing, addiction, then recovery, immaturity, then maturity, suffering, then freedom from suffering. I think in the first half of life, what we need to know is we continually use our ego to avoid problems. We avoid suffering and pain as we perceive it and conceive it as things to avoid. And addiction, of course, is avoidance. Avoidance of feelings, thoughts, and so on. And it always comes with consequences. So if we can stop avoiding and show up, we get to, as M. Scott Peck says, we get to transcend these things. We get to go above a meaningless of suffering. We get to go above the meaningless of addiction and go into something like recovery. We cannot be victims for very, very long. Life will always, always push us to contribute and grow, and it will probably do those things through suffering. So learning and accepting that life is first difficult, and secondly, we get to transcend it, putting those two together gives us what we call meaning and purpose. And I think meaninglessness is another way of describing addiction. It really is taking you nowhere. It really is addiction to what is, how we do things. Addiction is being stuck almost in a resentful state where you are redoing those negative feelings again and again and again. Resentiment, redoing those feelings of anger, bitterness, all the lower secondary feelings that come from a state of fear. So Eckhart Tolle speaks about how he had what the 12th step calls the spiritual awakening, the place that everybody's driving through the other 11 steps for. And he described lying in his bed, utterly depressed, and wondering, if life was even worth living. And he said he heard, "You don't have to go through this. You don't have to think like this." Whatever it might have been the exact words, I'm not sure. And he stopped himself and said, "Whoa, there are two people here. One voice is talking to another. Who are the two?" And I really believe that that's what M. Scott Peck was talking about. That's what Robert Frost was talking about with two roads diverging in a wood, is that we do have an ego that looks at problems as senseless, but then we also have another side of ourselves, which is probably referred to as a spiritual side or a soul, whatever you want to call it, makes no difference, that leads us through these things saying, I get to connect, I get to be part of, I get to arrive into beauty and love and all these higher aesthetic emotions and feelings and blissful states that all the great masters talk about. Self-actualization itself is getting to a place where you are metaphysically above your physical needs, your psychological needs, self-esteem and so on, and you are metaphysical. You have transformed, you have gone above your problems and so on. And you actually, like Tolle, you go above yourself and you wake up. So life is difficult, but you do get to transcend it.